And I guys are some seats. Please come inside. Thank you. My friends, King Solomon once said, there's a time for everything under the sun. There's a time to celebrate, time to plant, time to reap, a time to be silent, a time to speak. And he finishes off, there's a time to mourn. Today we are gathered to mourn the wonderful person and the wonderful life of Irene Ziegler. We gather to celebrate the life and mourn the passing of the taking of the precious gift God has given us, God has given the world, the gift of Irene of blessed memory. Beloved mother to Kathy Roth, cherished grandmother to Peter and Jeanette, beloved great-grandmother to Andrea and Madeline. I join all of you that are assembled here and are logging on virtually to express our deep condolences and deep feelings of sympathy to the entire family, friends, and community on behalf of myself, my family, and the entire Jewish community. Jewish tradition encompasses all of our life, day and night, light and dark, and even in the most difficult of situations, such as the loss of a loved one, our traditions are here to strengthen us, to guide us, and to help us grow and see beyond our loss. A Jewish funeral in particular is distinguished by its very simple and solemn nature. Its general format and traditions have been going on for thousands of years. And in Jewish tradition, death is not viewed as the end of life, but as a transition from a time of effort to a time of reward, where the soul of Irene continues to live on. And the days of life in this world are like stepping stones that lead the soul from this world to the next, where the soul enjoys the spiritual accomplishments of its mortal existence. God's very first words in the book of Genesis, in the Torah, God says to Adam, the very first human being, earth you are, and to earth you will return. In the words of King Solomon, and the earth returns to the land as it was, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. The next stage in the continuing saga of the human life is that the body returns to the earth, the source of all physical life, just as the soul returns to its divine root, it returns to God. Still, the passing of a loved one is a very painful experience. And for this reason, Jewish tradition mandates that we begin with the words of Psalms to serve as protective agents for the soul and are meritorious for it as it is accompanied to its final resting place. There's a special blessing that we begin a Jewish funeral service with. I'm going to recite that blessing in Hebrew, followed by in English, and feel free to respond, Amen. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher yotzar eschem badin, v'zan eschem badin, v'chilkel eschem badin, v'hemis eschem badin, v'yodea mispar kulchem, v'hu asid lahachayoschem ulokayim eschem badin, Baruch atah Adonai, v'chayeh hamesim. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who created you in judgment, nourished you in judgment, sustained you in judgment, and brought you to death in judgment. He knows the number of you all, and he will eventually resurrect you and maintain you in judgment. Blessed are you who revives the dead. Atag gibar la'olam Adonai mechayem esim atar rav lahoshia, mechalkel chayim bechesed mechayem esim barachamim rabim, soymech neiflim berefe chaylim umatir asurim, umekayem emanasai lisheni afar. Michomecha ba'al guburai sumi doimalach, melech meimis umachayim matzmiach Yeshua. You are mighty forever, my Lord. You resurrect the dead. You are powerful to save. He sustains the living with loving kindness, resurrects the dead with great mercy, supports the falling, heals the sick, releases the bound, and fulfills his trust to those who sleep in the dust. Who is like you, mighty one, and who can be compared to you, who brings death and restores life and causes deliverance to spring forth? ועל כל זה אנחנו חייבים להודות לך ולייחד את שמך הגדול הגיבור והנורא. אין ערך לך אדוני אלוהינו בעולם הזה, ואין זולתך מלכנו לחיי העולם הבא. אפס בלתך גוי עלינו למות המשיח, ואין דומה לך משיחנו לתחיית המתים. Continue with Psalm 73 from Tehillim, written by King David, or recited in Hebrew, followed by in English. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai Ra'i Lo Echsar, B'nois Desha Yarbitzeni Al Mei Menuchos Yinahalenu. Nafshi Yeshoy V'Gancheni B'Maglet Tzedek L'man Shemoi, Gam Ki Elech B'Gates Amaves, Lo Irara Ki Ata Imadi. Shiftecha Mishantecha Hema Yinachamuni, Tarech Lefonai Shulcha Neged Tzoyroi, Gishanta Vashem and Reishi Kaisi Rabaya. Ach toiv v'chesed yudifuni kol yimei chayoi, v'shafti b'veis Adonai la'erech yamin. A psalm by David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He revives my soul. He directs me in the paths of righteousness for the sake of his name. Even if I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they will comfort me. You will prepare a table before my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup is full. Only goodness and kindness shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord for many long years. Say Psalm 16, also a tradition to say at the beginning of the funeral service. Nechtam LeDavid. Shemreni el ki chasisi bach. Amart l'Adonai, Adonai ata, tavasi balalecha. L'kdoshim asher ba'aretz hema, ba'adirei kochat zibam. Yibru atzvoisam acher maharu, bal asich miskei midam, bal esa ashemoisam al sefasei. Adonai benas chalki v'chaisi ata temich garali. Chavalim nafuli ban ini mafnach la shafar alai. Avarech es Adonai asher ya'atzani aflelis yisuni chol yosai. Shivisi Adonai lenegdi samid kinini bal emait lachin samach libi vayagad kvedi af beser yishken levatach kilei saaz nafshi lishol leisitin chasid chalire shachas todini orachayim soivas amachis es panecha niimais b'mincha netzach. According to the Torah, one of the essential elements of the mourning process is the performance of what's called in Hebrew kriya. Kriya means to tear a garment. And there's a special tradition to tear a piece of clothing that the mourner is wearing. One of the explanations is, on a most practical level, the tradition is, the idea is to arouse within the mourner and all those present the ability to express their grief, to express their pain, to express the deep feelings in their heart. On a more comforting note, the kriya, the tearing of the garment, signifies that it is only the outer garment, the body, that has been torn away from us. But the inside, the soul of Irene, the soul continues to live on. The soul is there, and the feelings and the love that the family has for the deceased remains and grows even stronger with time. According to the Kabbalah, it says that there are 5 elements within a soul. And one of those elements remain always, all the time, at the grave. And that's why when we come and we visit our loved ones, they know, they feel it, and they enjoy it. We're going to say a special blessing in Hebrew, followed by in English. I'll say the English translation right now, actually. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, the true judge. We'll say it in Hebrew, and then we'll continue that blessing. Jewish tradition teaches that the deceased are aware of the words spoken in their presence until after they're laid to rest. It's therefore customary to pay tribute by extolling their noble deeds. Irene, or Momo, as many knew her, was a feisty, strong-willed woman all of her life until the very end. Born in Czechoslovakia, she spoke Hungarian at home, Russian, and a broken English that she learned from watching Sesame Street, and enough Yiddish to keep her family guessing. Her father, Samuel, was a tailor, and her mother, Julie, was a homemaker. They were strict but loving parents, and they taught their children to be very respectful, hardworking, tidy, and loving. Irene met her husband at the age of 17. She didn't technically want to go out with him at the time, but her younger sister, Relly, set them up. And since that day, Grandpa Martin pursued her relentlessly. Sadly, they were captured and taken off to the labor camps about a year later. Everyone was separated, and Irene lost touch with Martin. She ended up in Belsenbergen, as well as Auschwitz and labor camps and the ghetto. Once she was liberated in 1945, Irene was roaming the streets with pinching pains in her stomach, looking for any kind of food, even potato peels, if it meant to soothe the pain that she was feeling. She managed to find her friend, and they learned that a mutual friend of theirs, and Martin's, was looking for her, because Martin had sent for her. Martin was still being held in a holding cell in Hungary at the time, but liberated shortly after that, and was desperately trying to find Irene. Through the mutual friend, he ended up finding her, and they lived together for a short time, and eventually getting married around the age of 20, and had their daughter Kathy less than 2 years later. They worked hard all of their lives, and always kept a clean, welcoming home. Irene was a homemaker most of her life, and like a true Yiddish balabaste, always kept the most tidy, well-decorated home, and always cooked homemade meals, baked the most amazing, delicious breads, cakes, and pastries. She was passed on the skill of being a seamstress, working with alterations from her father, and cooking, baking skills from her mother and her grandmother. And she passed on those cooking and baking skills to her daughter, Kathy, and her grandkids also learned many delicious family recipes from her. Irene had 7 siblings, whom she outlived by many years. She was a Holocaust survivor, having spent time in the ghettos, the labor camps, where she lost her grandparents, parents, 3 of her siblings. In 1977, Irene immigrated to the United States, to Colorado, as her brother, Tibor Rothman, was living here. Irene was an incredible homemaker as well as a child caregiver. She was a fierce cook, baker, seamstress, and babysitter for many, many children growing up in Denver. She loved to sew outfits, throw and go to garage sales. She loved to travel, to play games. She collected art and china pieces from all over Europe and loved being with the grandkids, great-grandkids, and throwing big, lavish family dinners and fun picnics. She worked out religiously on her stationary bike and took daily walks in Utah Park for over miles every single day. She was very strong-willed, strong-minded, full of grit, and a strong woman to the very last minute. She took such great care of her husband, Martin, and of both of her grandchildren, Peter and Jeanette, and her great-granddaughters, Andrea and Maddie. She sadly was diagnosed with the onset of dementia about 10 years ago at the age of 88. And it got worse and worse in the last 6 years, to the point where she needed round-the-clock care for herself for the last 2 years of her life. She continued to live in her own home to the last minute. And if you'd ask her, Mama, is everything okay? Is everything fine? Anything hurt her? She was perfectly fine. She never showed if she was slowing down. She was always the strong, feisty, stubborn, tough little cookie that her family all looked up to, respected, learned from, were showered with gifts and love from, and loved to the very last second. Irene loved fiercely. She loved life, and life loved her back. She lived an honest and full life. She gave it her all and then some. Our hearts collectively hurt that she's no longer with us, but we are forever grateful to have been raised and loved by her and known her, to have learned so much from her, to have been able to call her our sweet little mamo, which means grandmother in Hungarian, for over 5 decades. Her amazing voice, beauty, wisdom, and spirit will live on forever. On Tuesday morning of January 2nd, 2024, at the age of 98 years old, Irene returned her soul to her maker. Irene is survived by her daughter, Kathy Roth, grandson, Peter Roth, granddaughter, Jeanette, and her great-granddaughters, Andrea and Maddie. We are sure that the knowledge and remembrance of the good name and deeds of Irene will be a source of strength and solace at this challenging time. And we bless the family that may the Almighty comfort them amongst the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem, and that only joy and happiness accompany them all the days of their life. And let us all say, Amen. At this point, I'd like to ask Peter and Jeanette to come up if you'd like to share a few words.
Rabbi Sirota, thank you for that lovely eulogy. And this is very repetitive, so I do apologize. Dear family and friends, thank you for coming out on such a chilly-ish day to show your respects to our dear grandmother, mother, great-grandmother, aunt, and great-aunt, Irene Ziegler. Some of us all knew her just as Mama, which means grandmother in Hungarian. We all remember my grandma in our own special way. Maybe you remember her as your child's and trusted babysitter, or perhaps you remember her for the scrumptious homemade breads, poppy seed kolaches, Hungarian goulashes, and all the other unforgettable, delicious savory dishes, and hundreds of desserts she used to bake. It's possible you remember her for her talents as a seamstress, as she could alter literally any piece of clothing, or sew any dress, or create a piece of clothing from scratch. Maybe you ran into her at the flea market where she helped her grandpa every weekend. Or possibly you ran into her at her favorite store, TJ Maxx. Or maybe, just maybe, you came to her annual grass sales that we threw every summer. Wherever you might remember her from, it's certain that she made a lasting impression. And this is a little repetitive, but worth saying many times because I we should never forget this. My grandma was one of 8 children, born in 25 in Czechoslovakia. Even as a child, she was outgoing and stubborn. She always wanted to be a historian, and living to 98, she could have written her own history books. She was a voracious reader and spoke Hungarian, Russian, English, and of course a little Yiddish. I'd hear her and my grandpa throwing Yiddish words and terms around when they didn't want us or any of the other kids to understand what they were saying. But that's where I picked up loving terms like vase, mir, and meshuga matata. I learned Hungarian from my grandparents, and my grandma learned English from Peter and from me, and also from watching Sesame Street with all of her many children that she helped babysit for so many wonderful families over many years. Some of you are here today and living fulfilling adult lives, partially shaped by her upbringing. Her English might have been broken, like cucumber, she could never pronounce it, was cucumber, and healthy was healthy. But everyone always understood her, and she learned all on her own without any classes. Even in her very last days, we were all amazed how naturally she resorted to speaking English. My grandma, as well as my other 3 grandparents, were all Holocaust survivors. My grandma's parents, grandparents, and 3 siblings were sadly all killed in the camps or ghettos. And one of her little brothers later died of tuberculosis immediately after the war. My grandmother served time in Belsenbergen and Auschwitz. She was liberated in 45 by Americans and searched for food and her family for weeks. I won't dwell on the hardships and horrors of those years, as they did haunt her till her very last breath, but did want to share the beautiful love story with my grandpa that could have been made into a movie. He pursued her relentlessly right before were captured and taken to camps. She always turned him down, and her sister played matchmaker. Her sister Relly, who actually is buried right over there. Yeah, played matchmaker one day, and my grandma was not aware that she was on an actual date until she caught herself in the middle of a blind date. She knew right away that her sister Relly, her younger sister, was behind it all. She went out with my grandpa that one day, and from there was no going back after that. It was just a lovely love story after that. Sadly, they got separated during the war, and my grandpa lost touch with her. After they were liberated, he was temporarily held in a Hungarian prison and had a friend, a mutual friend, that went out searching for her. The friend found her after a long and arduous search and brought my grandma to the prison where he was being held. When he saw her, it was like they were never separated. Once he was released, they lived together for less than a year. They got married and then had my mom um, a little later, around the age of 22. Truly stuff of what historic romance movies are made of. Peter will be reading this as I'm still writing it.
They loved and respected each other over 51 years. Our grandpa worked hard so that my grandma never had to work, and my grandma took such good care of him by cooking and baking for him, giving him a beautiful and clean home, and always looking well put together and beautiful for him outside the home. We should all be so lucky to have a partner as loving, caring, and respectful as they were to each other. Don't get me wrong, they fought too. When she started pestering him and picking on him, he'd immediately hide and retreat to one of his many workshops throughout the house. She chose to work from home to bring in some income by babysitting for many families, some of who are here today. We counted how many children she raised and babysat, including us, and it added up to 27. Her very first kids were Elisa and David Goldman. Then she took in so many other sweet kids whom she loved like they were her own, like Michelle and Greg, who were right there. Ilana Novoseletsky, Aaron, Angelica Kalika, Natalie, and Boris Nikolaevsky's sons, and Iris's kids, just to name a few. Some of my favorite memories are of my grandmother raising these children. She came alive. She had purpose. She was so deeply nurturing to them as if they were her own. She'd cook for them, take them to different parks on long walks, sing to them in Hungarian, play hundreds of different games with them, bathe them, and made sure they left her home cleaner than they had arrived. Taught them the alphabet and to read a little, and taught them manners. And she showed them so much love that sometimes these kids didn't want to go home and cried when their parents showed up to take them home. She was doing this from her heart, not for the money, but because she genuinely loved each and every child. This is just one of the legacies that she leaves behind. She also raised me and my brother, and during our formative years as our own parents, worked 2 jobs each, some years so that they could provide us with a better life. We immigrated to the U.S. in 1978 when my grandmother chose the U.S. as our final destination and new home. My sister and I learned so much from our grandparents. We learned the value of money, a hard work ethic, respecting elders, proper manners. We learned Hungarian. She learned Russian and some Yiddish, how to play chess, checkers, how to cook, bake, and keep a clean home, how to iron sheets, well, not me. And we learned how very important it is to take care of family. That is who we turn to at times when tough and when no one else will help. My grandparents were always there for us. They never said no, ever. We're so grateful to have such amazing life lessons, help when we needed it, and so much love for our grandma. She was truly the epitome of what any kid would want from a grandmother. They don't make them like mama. She was one of a kind. I have fond memories of our grandma riding her secondhand stationary bike every single day, walking in Utah Park, rain or shine. She used to try and sneak all kinds of sugar-free, low-sodium, fat foods into my grandpa's daily meals, but he'd sneak out and buy himself the occasional salami or full-fat sourdough. He was here for a good time, and she was here for a long time. A very long time. She would love rolling up her skirt and taking off her shirt to sunbathe in the backyard, just her bra and no sunscreen, until she turned nice and golden brown and more beautiful. Even though those were the wise choices she made for them during the prime of her life, dementia set in and everything changed. She began eating like a 10-year-old boy, and at his birthday party, pizza, ice cream, cookies, and Sprite. She stopped coloring her hair and dressing up in her Sunday best. Slowly, she lost the ability to go out and enjoy restaurants or dinner parties, the movies, theaters, shopping, or her side hobby of making a couple rounds at Costco, and of course eating the samples, trying to pretend she was only there once. Dementia got the best of my grandma, and sadly she was no longer the strong woman we all knew 10 years ago. But the fact that she powered through for more than 10 years with this horrible, bless her little heart for sticking around for us for 98 and didn't even realize that there's one thing we can take away from the last week of her life spent in the hospital and hospice is that you should tell your loved ones how much you love them far more often. Visit them while they're still healthy. So, grandparents, your parents, and your friends. Do fun things with them. Remind them how much they mean to you while you can. We will miss our sweet little mama, but know that she is a better place now. And she could be with our grandpa again and all her family and siblings. I know we'll meet again.
I know we'll meet again someday in some way. Rest easy, sweet little mama. She was our biggest cheerleader, by the way.
At this point, it's a tradition and an opportune time to ask forgiveness for anything that we may bring pain that we may have caused, or we ask that if there's anything we did or did not do that caused anguish in any way, that we be forgiven, that should be, as we say in Yiddish, a good better, a good advocate on our behalf in heaven to pray for our well-being and for worldwide peace. So for families and Say Shalom Bimrama. Say Shalom Aleinu. Eyal Kol Yisrael. Hebrew. Hebrew. So we have with us over here Earth from Mount Olives from Jerusalem, Israel. Special merit, special honor, very happily from the land of Israel. So her family. Anyone would like the opportunity to put some earth in, and at this moment, it's customary not to hand the shovel to someone else. So when you're done, you will set it down. The other person will pick it up. That's not usually how we do things. Something to someone, but we want to show our reluctance to doing something this nature, so that we don't deciding another song. So anyone would like to, if not obligated, but if you'd like to, you can do that at this point. Just careful around the edges over here. There's be mindful of where you're walking. Lam Natseach Ludni Kairach Mizmar Shimuzais Kalamim Hazinu Kalish Vichalet Gambani Adam Gambani Ish Yachad Asher Ve'evin Ki Dabar Chaklois Vahadus Lubi Fuzumais Ada Labasha Azni Aflach Bechinar Fidas Lama Ira Bimeira Avena Keva Yusibeni Habaitchim Al Chela Mavarais Ashram Yisalalu Ach Laifada Yifta Ish Layitin and the Hinkafrai the Yekir Pidun Afsham Vahada Lailam. B'chi oid lenetzach lo yira hashachas ki yira chachamim yamusu yachad kasil vavario vidu va'azru la'acherim chelam kirbim b'tema la'ilam mishmeisim l'darveda kar b'shmeisim ali adamais va'adam bikra ba'yali nimshach ha'vehimis nidu zadarkim kasalamoi v'achirein b'chiyam yitzasela katzayin nishol shatu mavis yirim va'yurdu b'am yisharim l'bayker v'tzuram yivalish ha'om misvuloi ach alini p'nashim yashar al-ki chinisela Yasher Ish Yerbek by Basely, Lady Mosi Kakakol, Yered Afra, Kiboide, Naturally Kakaya, Bivari, the Hokisita Block, Tabayadar, a voice of Anita, Layura, or Adam Biko, Valayav, and Nishak on the Himis. Zur Tamim Pa'alaik, hold the Rachab Mishpat. Elamuna vein Avil Tadik Yashahu. Atzur Tamim Bechol Poyal Mi Yomer Lamatipo, Hashalat Vamatu, Vamal Nimis, Machaya, Marich Alvayal. Atzur Tamim Bechol Maasa, Mi Yomer Lamatasa, Ha'imer Ba'isa Chesed China Manutasa, Duviskus Hanek Kisa Hakshiva Ba'asa. Tadik Bechol the Rachab Atzur Tamim Aracha Paim Male Rachmin, Chamol Na Vachusna, Alavis Vanim. Kilha Adam Haslutus of Harachamim, Sadik Aton, the Lahamis or Hafis, or Shabiat, Pikton, Kalufais, Khalila, the Khaz of Haninu in place, Khalila, the Khaz of Haninu in place, Vina, Enough of Braham, Melina, Kilha Adam Harachim Baslutus, Adam Ben Shana Yea, Elef Shana Michya, by Yisun like Loy Hoya Yea, Barach Dina, MS, Mamis, Mahaya, Baruch Uki MS Dina, Mishata, Kolba Ina, Mishalam, Adam Hashbaina Vidina. Like Kolish Mai Haidaya Yitim. Vidano and the Nike Tzadik Mishpataha, Titzak bit of Rahos, Pesiska Pishataha. The Ain Lahar Afar Vida Shipataha. Tzadik Ata the Nev Yasha Mishpataha. Dain MS, Shepet Tzadik MS. Baruch Dain MS, Shakal Mishpat of Tzadik MS. Nefesh Kolchai Biadaha. Tzadik Mala Yimincha Biadaha. Rachem Al Pleta Sin Yadaha. The Sermon Malach Harat Yadaha. Gedol ha'etz of Arab ha'aliyah asher enachat b'kufes ha'chodarcha b'nei adam lasis le'ish kedracha b'chifrim ha'alalav lahagit kiyasha and the netzui v'loy avlasaboy Adonai nasan v'Adonai lakach Yehi shem Adonai mevera v'rachim yechaper oven v'loy ashtes v'hir b'lo hashav abay v'loy ya'er kofim asem. To the Yom Rachmim prayer in Hebrew followed by English. El Mole Rachamim, Sheikhin Bamreimim, Hamse Menucha Nechoina, Al Kanpe Hashkina, Bemalois Bidashim, Utahirim, Zoya Herakia, Masirim Es Nishmas, Ruchel Bat Shmuel, Shahol Chala Lama, Ba'avur Shnadbu, Zaka Ba'ataskars Nishmasa, בגן עדן תהא מנוחסה לכן, בעל הרחמים יסתיריה בסתר כנפיו לעולמים. ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתה, אדוני הוא נחלתה, ושנוח על משכבה בשלום, ונאמר Amen. O God, full of compassion, who dwells on high, grant true rest upon the wings of the Shekhinah in the exalted spheres of the holy and pure, who shine as the resplendence of the firmament of Ruchel, daughter of Shmuel, who has gone to her supernal world, for charity has been donated in remembrance of her soul. May her place of rest be in Gan Eden. Therefore, may the all-merciful one shelter her with the cover of his wings forever, and bind her soul in the bond of life. The Lord is her heritage. May she rest in her resting place in peace. And let us all say, Amen. At this point, we're going to recite the Kaddish. I'll ask Peter if you can help me to recite the Kaddish. One of the most important prayers. Kaddish shares the same Hebrew words, same Hebrew letters as Kadosh, which means holy, sacred. And then after each stanza, we'll say Amen. 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 At this point in time, there's a special tradition to comfort the mourners. So we'll make a line, like an aisle, people on both sides. Stand up. Flowers. If they're gonna cover it, they'll put it on. Yeah, you can put it on.
Оставьте на стуле, они